y'all. You're listening to Criminalist Behavior Podcast. And today we're going to be discussing the Jennings 8 murders. That is 8 people that were murdered in the state of Louisiana, of course, because we cover Louisiana topics. If this is your first time listening, hi, my name is Sarah Soudier, and I'm your host for Criminalist Behavior Podcast. Thank you for listening to the show, and I hope you enjoy it. So, trigger warning, this episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults and children. Listener discretion is advised. This case in particular involves death of several young women, so if that's not something that you can handle or whatever, just tune in next week, and we'll just go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So this case is also known as the Jeff Davis 8. It refers to a series of unsolved murders that happened in Jefferson Davis Parish, which is why it's called Jeff Davis 8. It involved 8 women being found in the areas of swamp, drainage canals, and in the various surroundings of Jennings, Louisiana. The years these murders took place were in 2005 all the way up until 2009. Most of the victims were involved in drugs and prostitution, your common sex workers. They also shared common traits like poverty, mental health problems, and of course they had a history of drug abuse, and some had a history of doing sex work, any means to make a living and try to survive, or to support their habit. So the victims also have something else in common, as they all served as informants for the police department about the local drug trade, and they often provided police with information about all the other Jefferson Davis 8 victims before they all died from being murdered from the same killer. The case has been taking steps back with the sheriff's office because there's lost or missing evidence involved, and some may say that it could be police cover-up. The author and investigator reporter Ethan Brown, he wrote a book, and he revealed that there are multiple suspects in the Jefferson Davis 8 case, and that law enforcement's own witnesses have named members of local law enforcement as suspects in the case. So this means that they are stating that law enforcement may be involved in the killings, or, like I said, cover-ups for these cases that happened to these 8 victims. So, like I said, the victims were found in the swamps and canals, and I'm going to go ahead and list every one of the victims and their ages, and then we're going to go ahead and tell a little background of each victim. This may be a 2-parter. I'm going to try to see how long it lasts for me covering everything, but I may end up breaking this into 2 episodes. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the names of the victims. The first victim is Loretta Lewis. She was age 28. Second victim was Ernestine Marie Daniels Patterson. She was at age 30. Third victim was Kristen Gary Lopez. She was 21. The fourth victim was Whitney Dubois. She was 26. The fifth victim was LaConya, also known as Muggy Brown. She was the age of 23. The sixth victim was Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno. She was age 24. The seventh victim was Brittany Gary at age 17. She was the youngest victim in this case. And the final victim that we know about was named Nicole Guillory, and she was age 26. So please note that this case is unsolved and the investigation is ongoing. If you have any information in relation to any part of this case, if you knew one of the victims, any information, you're asked to contact the crime series documentaries and good Lord, why can't I think of what it's called? Anyways, just contact the local law enforcement in the Jennings area, and they'll be able to direct you where you need to go. So there is a document series called Death in the Bayou, and it, focuses on Jennings 8. And the series is a 4-part docuseries that investigates the murders of the 8 women that I just mentioned, who knew each other and whose bodies were discovered in similar circumstances. The series features interviews with the relatives of the victims, local law enforcement officials, and previously apprehended suspects. You can watch the series on Investigative Discovery or IMBD. Those, if you have a smart TV, those are some little apps that you can download, or obviously cable, right? But if you're like me, we just deal with the apps because cable doesn't show much of anything, right? So, like I said, the 8 women were murdered in Jennings, and the small town's dark secrets began to unravel. It was a total population of 10,517, and it's known to be the place of Louisiana Oil. So the oil industry was very popular for Jennings, Louisiana. All of the victims lived on the south side of Jennings, and according to observers, South Jennings is the home of the poor and the working class, while north side is known as the middle and upper class. The south side is allegedly known for the drug trades and sex work. There were varied causes of death among the women. Some had their throats slashed, while several appeared to have asphyxiated. There were some bodies that were too decomposed to be able to determine the cause of death. The victims ranged between different races, black and white, like I said, age 17 to the age of 30. They all knew each other, and it is a small town. You think 10,000 residents, right? The Rolling Stone pointed out victims were living in poverty, and they had criminal records for drug use and petty crime. So they had a little record, but nothing too extensive, right? And I mentioned the author Ethan Brown, as he did a detailed investigation on this case. He ventured into Jennings to conduct his own investigation back in 2011. And he interviewed all the families and suspects that were possibly known and task force personnel. He did an examination of all the public records, and he uncovered evidence that pointed him away from the serial killer theory and toward a more complex cover-up orchestrated by authorities. So, Ethan Brown, he discovered all types of evidence, y'all, that determines that this wasn't the work of one person. It wasn't known to be a serial killer, but yet he has evidence showing that it is a cover-up by law enforcement. The victims not only knew each other well, they shared similar drug addictions and financial problems. They all served as police informants, like I said. And according to the relatives, many seemed excessively anxious or frightened before they all disappeared. So maybe they were threatened if they didn't do this or whatever, then consequences are going to be whatever. And apparently it got out of hand, or I'm not sure what happened. Obviously death, but why is be known. It is clear, though, the one thing they couldn't do is rely on police. So body 1, I'm going to go ahead and break down a little bit about each of the victims. So body 1, like I said, was Loretta Lynn Chasson Lewis. She was a loving mother, wife, and daughter. Her father is unknown, but her mother's name was Patricia Ann DeSchotel Lecomte, and she died 2 years after the death of her daughter. So Loretta's mom died 2 years after her daughter was murdered. She never got to see justice. She never got to know anything about her daughter and why she was killed brutally. It was in 2005, on May 20th. It was the decomposed body of 28-year-old Loretta Lynn Lewis. She was fished out of a canal on the outskirts of Jennings, on the southwest of Louisiana. She was known to turn tricks as she battled a crack addiction. Her death was seemingly to fall out of a drug trade that ran along the side of Highway I-10 corridor and left areas like South Jennings. Her funeral was held at Living Word Church of God and buried at the Doucette Cemetery. So that's all I could find about Loretta Lynn Chasson Lewis. I tried digging deep to get a little bit more about each victim, and this is all I was able to come up with. So she was determined to die on May 20th, 2005 at the age of 28. Her body was nude, spotted floating in a canal about 5 miles outside of Jennings by a fisherman in Grand Marais Drainage Canal off of Highway 1126. Examiners said they found significant amounts of cocaine and alcohol in her system, but her cause of death remains undetermined. Chad Chasson said he last saw his sister Loretta at a local gas station shortly before she disappeared, and he claims that he saw her getting into a car with Richard. Loretta never talked bad about Frankie, and when she got into the car with Frankie, she was happy with Frankie, he said. So that's the last time he was ever able to see his sister alive. And as we get on with the story, you'll know that Frankie Richard, or some people know him as Frankie Richard, just depends on what area of the bayou or Louisiana you're from, it's pronounced different, but he is a known suspect in this case, so spoiler alert. So, like I said, Chad, which was Loretta's sister, last seen the sister getting into the truck with Frankie at a local gas station. So, that is Loretta. Body number 2 was Ernestine Marie Daniels Patterson. She was a native and lifelong resident of Jennings. She worked at Iota State University and was married with 2 sons and 2 daughters. So she was married and had a total of 4 kids. Another prostitute, like I said, they had all that in common. She was discovered in a drainage canal off of Highway 102 south of Jennings. 2 men were held for second-degree murder on this case, but the charges ended up getting dropped after the fact. Ernestine Patterson's remains turned up in a canal about 5 miles south where Loretta Lewis was discovered. Patterson was reportedly also having drugs in her system, but her throat had been slashed, and wounds on her wrists suggested a significant struggle. So those are those defensive wounds. Like, she tried fighting for her life, and obviously she was succumbed. Her death is classified as a homicide, and her funeral was held at Fondell Memorial Chapel in Jennings. So, if it was the same killer, he got a little bit more invasive, I would say, because he started slashing his victim's throat, and with the wounds on the wrist, not sure if she was tied up or if that was defensive wounds, but I could just about imagine them being defensive wounds. So we're going to get on to body number 3, Kristen Gary Lopez. Kristen's aunt described her to be a very outgoing person. She was very well liked, and it was not unusual for her friends and family to not hear from her for periods of time, because she used to go on these little binges, and they knew about her habit, but she wasn't reported missing until 10 days passed, and no one heard from her. So it was on March 18th, 2007. 21-year-old Kristen Gary Lopez was found in another canal by a fisherman at Petit Jean Canal off of Highway 99. She was 5'2" and weighed a total of 94 pounds, so she was very small, y'all. Her body was found naked and was rotting in the water. 2 weeks before her death, friends of hers stated that she was paranoid and they assumed she went on a drug binge. 2 suspects were arrested for her case as well, just like it was for Ernestine Marie Patterson. But Jennings pimp Frankie Richard and his niece Hannah Connor, as those were the 2 suspects arrested, they were released due to lack of evidence. So they didn't have enough evidence to charge Frankie and his niece Hannah. So they had to let him go. Again, this is the same person that's involved so far in all three of these murders. So we have Frankie Richard and his niece, Hannah Connor, involved in Loretta Chasson's case, Ernestine Patterson, and now Kristen Gary Lopez. If you have one suspect or one person involved in all three, come on. Obviously, something's happening here. It was 2 years after the first two discoveries that Kristen Lopez's corpse was found in a body of water. Lopez was nude with just one sock on her left foot. The decomposition prevented the official cause of death from being determined, and it said that she may have been killed somewhere else, and then her body was placed at the canal during a different time. Tracy Chasson was the person who reported Kristen missing, and she was actually arrested and booked on accessory after the fact because they thought that she had more evidence or more information involved to Kristen's death or the fact that how she went missing. So the authorities eventually dropped those charges against Tracy because, well, obviously she reported her cousin missing, right? So hello. I think you need to look elsewhere. And there's no evidence linking her to it. I mean, in one instance, the Times-Picayune, which is a local newspaper, they stated that the chief investigator bought up a pickup truck from an inmate known to be friends with one of the victims. They bought a pickup truck, I'm sorry. A witness later said she saw Lopez, which is the third victim that we're talking about, in the truck on the day of her disappearance. But by then the vehicle had already been washed and resold. So what that means is an investigator, the chief investigator, bought a pickup truck from an inmate that was known to be friends with the victim. A witness saw Kristen in that said truck with the chief investigator. No, remember, they are known police informants, so maybe that's why she was in the truck. But then the truck was washed and resold. So something's fishy there. Why would you have to wash a truck and resell it after you just bought this truck, after Krista was in it? I think you're trying to hide something there. So the investigator that bought that truck was eventually fined, and he was removed from the case of the Jefferson Davis aide. He was placed in charge of evidence at the parish sheriff's office. So if you watch Investigator Discoveries Death in the Bayou, you'll find more detailed information, and I highly, highly, highly suggest that y'all go watch that, y'all. In December 2007, there was 2 inmates that told Jennings sergeant on tape what they knew about the truck from Lopez and how it was sold to that investigator and scrubbed clean of evidence. Suspicious of his colleagues, there was an officer named Ewing. He sent the tapes to a regional FBI office, and they were relayed to supervisors on a task force instead. So according to these series, Richard was arrested for Kristen's murder along with Connor, his niece, and the charges once again, y'all, the third time dropped, right? In a statement from the Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff's Office said Richard was never arrested for the death of Lopez and was jailed instead on a rape charge that was later dropped by the district attorney. So the Sheriff's Office stated that Frankie Richard, that's involved in the first 2 murders and now connected with Kristen, wasn't arrested for Kristen's murder, but instead he was arrested for a rape case. Okay, so let's just keep going on with this story. Here we are on body number 4. Her name was Whitney Dubois. Whitney had a 5-year-old daughter at the time of her death. She was last seen in the middle of the night at Frankie Richard's house. Ding, ding, ding. Rings a bell. Frankie's house was on McKinley Street in Jennings. And before she went to Frankie's house, she went to her grandma's street, which was the next street over from Frankie's. She was at her grandma's house 2 hours prior to going to Frankie's house. And she was also thought to be killed somewhere else, and then her body being placed at its location where it was found. She was never reported missing, and it is said that her daughter made her a Mother's Day card that she would never get to give her mother. The funeral was held at Matthews and Son Funeral Home, and she was buried at Greenwood Cemetery. So, Whitney's body, y'all, was discovered naked by the side of a public road near the intersection of Bobby and Earl Duhan roads. This girl was near an intersection. Out in plain view, y'all. This was 5 miles outside of the town, and she was found in the middle of the road by a person named Jamie Trahan. Jamie Trahan was a local drug user who said to do occasional jobs for Frankie. So Whitney was the first of the Jennings 8 victims to be discarded on dry land. Like I said, the other ones have been found in canals and drainage ditches. Whitney was in the middle of an intersection. The examiners detected a large amount of drugs in her system, but they still don't know what caused her death. So the niece and sister of of Whitney, Brittany Jones and Taylor Dubois, they are shown working at a dry cleaning facility in South Jennings in that documentary I was telling you, Death in the Bayou. They become advocates in seeking justice not only for Whitney, but for all the victims that was reportedly murdered in Jennings. They said that they see a lot of drug deals in the parking lot, and they see a lot of soliciting in the car wash that's next door to their place of employment of the dry cleaning. They say they see their fair share of criminal activity throughout the day, and according to Brittany Jones, many locals think that the presence of drugs in the victims has only clouded the investigation and made the investigators distracted. All those women were murdered, and we're going with that theory of a police cover-up or any police being involved, and what way to say that, they OD'd on drugs, but that's still not placing their body out the location. And the fact that throat was slit, no defensive wounds, no, it's just not making any sense. So Brittany Jones said that she hopes that the special circumstances and all those involved in this investigation will raise awareness on the cold case of the Jennings 8, and maybe they could find out more information and hold those or that someone that's accountable for all these murders. A lot of witnesses have a history of drug addiction, so their word really does not serve or hold up, at least according to investigators and the court system. They are not sufficient witnesses on this case because they have a known drug product. They hold all the keys to the information. They're out on the streets. They hear the talk of all the drug dealers. And, it's a small town, like I said, 10,000. So everybody knows everybody. So when word gets around rather quickly. So there were 3 women found before Whitney. And she said that she couldn't even feel that family's pain until it became a part of her pain when Whitney passed. She said that all these victims are someone's sister, niece, daughter, granddaughter, mother, whatever the case is. They all belong to someone. They all have family and friends that love them. Regardless of their bad choices and life decisions, they all have family and friends that love them. She left behind her daughter. Her daughter's name, like I said, she was 5 years old, Beyonce Jones. How cute is that, y'all? And the fact that she made her mother a Mother's Day card and was so excited to give her mom that Mother's Day card, and she never got the chance to give it because her mom ended up missing and then later found dead. That is just heartbreaking. That is crazy. So, Whitney was actually found the day before Mother's Day, and they were planning her funeral on Mother's Day. Yeah, that even adds more to the fact that, oh my God, her body was found the day before Mother's Day. Her daughter just made it a Mother's Day card and could not give it. That is so horrible. So every year, the family of Whitney goes to the graveyard on Mother's Day to celebrate Mother's Day with Whitney. They said that they know that it's got to be difficult for Beyonce, Whitney's child, and they're trying to just be strong and there for her. That is crazy. So Beyonce is now 17, and she said that it's really not easier for her knowing that her mom was brutally killed. She said that she is still devastated, and she just wants to know why they had to take her from her mother. Like, why did they take her mother? That, y'all, is so sad. So sad. And the fact that the coroner could not determine a cause of death for Whitney, Taylor stated that this is your job. Like, you call yourself a medical professional, yet you still can't determine the cause of death for Whitney. How is it that you are working in this field? Like, not trying to take it out on the coroner, but at the same time, not making sense, because in her mind, she's like, there's got to be a cause of death. There's no one that just dies and no one knows why. We know it is not a natural causes. Like, she was fine. Like, why? Just why? You know, all those what ifs and all those questions that you want answered, and they always go unanswered, y'all. And especially in this case, since it's still a cold case. So, body number 5, she was known as Muggy Brown, but her name was Laconia Brown. She was 23 years old, and she was found on May 29th of 2008. She was a lifelong resident of Jennings, and she attended Jennings High School. She was last seen on May 8th around 2 a.m. So that was 21 days. 21 days before her body was found. So 3 weeks before her body was found is when she was last seen at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was found on the side of East Rocket Road by a police officer. She was fully clothed, but she didn't have any shoes on. Her throat was slashed, and her body was doused in bleach. So they doused her body in bleach, try to get rid of all the evidence that may tie someone to her. She was wearing a white tank top shirt that had been stained white to pink, which police believe that may have possibly been blood that was watered down, that, you know, changed it to the pinkish color. And her body was sent to the coroner's office in Calcasieu Parish, and it was there that they determined her death to be a homicide. Her throat was slit, and she suffered 7 cuts to the neck and 3 cuts behind her right ear. The cause of death is suspected to be the asphyxia, but all the bodies were so advanced in decomposition that the cause of death was very difficult to determine. So like I said, she was last seen on May 8th at 2 a.m. and she wasn't discovered until May 29th, which was 3 weeks after she was last seen. So if she was killed on the night that she was last seen, her body's just been rotting in the road for 3 weeks. Louisiana is hot, it's muggy. You can have seasons, various seasons throughout a given day. I mean, it's not known to be very cold, like just heat and nasty. So Muggy's family believed that she may have known something horrible was about to happen to her, as she was living in fear days before she died. Apparently, Muggy Brown was implicated in a rape case with the suspect from the murder of Ernestine Patterson. So as you could tell, Ernestine, like I said, Ernestine was the second woman to be murdered in this case. So, she was a witness in Ernestine Patterson's rape case. So they think that because she knew information about that whoever was involved in a rape case or knew information in that took her out because of it. So now we're going to body number 6. Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno. Crystal, she was 24 years old. She was found on September 11th, 2008. She liked to fish, sing, and she enjoyed listening to music, as like most of us do. And those who live in Louisiana, hello, fishing, singing, listening to that reggae, swamp pop music, or everybody, all the genres of music, but Louisiana is known for jazz, reggae, blues, reggae, like swamp pop. She loved spending time with her daughter, Anae, and I do apologize if I mispronounced that. She was married, and her husband's name was Stanley Lee Zeno, and her parents were Brian Lee and Sarah Ann Gaspard Benoit. So they were from Lake Arthur. Hunters reported a foul smell in a wooded area, and that is where they found skeletal remains. So decomposition already been said. Natural elements prevented examiners from determining those remains. So there was no cause of death that was able to be determined because it was literally just bone. There was no skin attached, no tissue, no muscle, no saliva, no DNA linking her other than just the bone. They must have identified because, obviously the teeth and dental records, that's what they had to go by. Chris and Zeno's parents say that their daughter started using drugs early on, and she was diagnosed as being bipolar, which now they don't use that term. They call it manic depressive disorder. She was diagnosed with that at the age of 12. So at the age of 24 is whenever she was found dead. She was suffering with bipolar disorder, or manic depressive disorder as they call it now, for 12 years. So she turned to drugs to try to cope with that. Just a little side note on bipolar. Like bipolar, they call it manic depressive as well, because one minute you could be happy-go-lucky, the next minute you could be sad and crying, or you could be happy-go-lucky and, oh my God, a switch flipped, and then you're mad at the world and you're on a rampage. So manic depressive because it happens rather quickly. So we're on body number 7. This is Brittany Gary. She was the youngest of all the victims on the Jefferson Davis 8. She was found on November 15th, on 2008. It was on November 2nd, which is, again, 13 days before her body was found. She left her home around 5 o'clock in the afternoon on South Doyle Street in Jennings, and she walked a few blocks to the Family Dollar store. She wanted to go over there to the Family Dollar store because back in the day, we were only using prepaid minutes, so she wanted to buy minutes for her cell phone. And this is when minutes and all were a big hit. Cell phones just getting popular. They're not those big Zach Morris cell phones, These are the little phones. So she wanted to go get minutes. She went to the Family Dollar store at 5 o'clock in that afternoon. The Family Dollar store was located on Plaquemine Street, and she was last seen on surveillance camera at 5:30 p.m. So she made it to the dollar store about 30 minutes after she left her home. She was seen on the surveillance camera purchasing the minutes for her cell phone, and then she exited the store alone. This was the last time anyone saw her. Her mother's name was Teresa Gary, and she reported her daughter missing, and she feared the worst. After 24 hours passed, and she did not hear, and no one ever saw or remember seeing her daughter, Brittany Gary. She was freaking, y'all. I know if something happened to my children, as I have two, oh my God, I'll be just like Brittany's mom, Teresa, and I'll be on a rampage. I will be going on that street, calling anybody and everybody my child knew, and I promise you, I'm going to get some answers. I promise you, I will get some answers, and we're going to seek it. So, Brittany was not known to just disappear for long periods of time without letting someone know about where she's going. So Brittany always informed someone where she was going. So she was always said to at least call or at least answer calls. And when all the calls made to her went straight unanswered, that's whenever she was reported missing. The family just moved back to Louisiana. They were living in Houston and Lufkin, Texas, less than a week before Brittany went missing. She was known to do drugs in the past, but she got clean whenever they moved to Texas, and she tried distancing herself from the crowd she used to hang with when she moved back to Louisiana, but it was known that Brittany never was into sex work or any prostitution or anything like that. The only thing known about Brittany was she had a former drug addiction, which, like I said, she got clean whenever she was in Texas, and they just moved back a week prior to her going missing to Louisiana. She vanished on November 2nd, like I said, after she was seen at the Dallas Store surveillance camera. And just a week after her remains were found, just a week after that, her remains were found off of a highway in Jennings. They identified Brittany by her tattoos, and they weren't able to determine her cause of death either. So the family had to identify her by her tattoos. And a case I'm going to be discussing a little in the future, you'll know that tattoos can be the only means of identification other than dental work, because some bodies can just be that badly decomposed or burned, or you never know what may happen to a victim. So that could be a means of identifying a body. I know personally, I was able to identify a person that was brutally murdered by the markings of the tattoos on their body. And y'all, that could be a lifesaver, a game changer, whatever you want to call it, in identifying a victim. So the last body is Nicole Guillory. Nicole was 26 when she died, and she was born in Lake Charles. Her parents were Wayne and Barbara Anslet Guillory, and she was a resident at Lake Arthur, and she had 4 beautiful children. She enjoyed listening to music and loved the outdoors. It is said that the loss of Nicole is not only felt by her family and friends, but everyone in the community. As all these Jefferson 8 Davis murders, the community was impacted very, very hard. So Nicole was not any exception to that. Nicole's funeral was held at Matthews and Son Funeral Home in Jennings, and she was laid to rest at Andrus Cove Cemetery. So she had Jefferson Parish Police Department Sheriff Ricky Edwards announced the formation of a task force from local, state, and federal enforcement agencies to investigate all these murders that were occurring. While he assured some of the residents there was scrutiny in revolving that they will not catch this killer and there's not enough evidence to at least book someone, or at least a similar suspect that's involved in all the murders, Mr. Frankie Richard and his niece, Hannah Connor. But they didn't succeed. Nicole's body was spotted off of I-10 in Acadia Parish, and there's no answers in regards to any of it. Just hours after she was reported missing, highway workers came across her body. There is again no official ruling regarding the cause of her death. A friend named Cindy Struble wrote after her death, open quotations, "She was my best friend. I really miss her jokes and her beautiful smile. I think about her every day, and she misses and she loves Nicole." Close quotations. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. On Thursday, I am going to release information about the suspects that are involved, not just Frankie Richard and Hannah Connor, but some of the other people that may be involved in this case. So make sure you tune in, because that is a lot to talk about. I'm going to also go ahead and point out some other additional information regarding this case. And I'm going to go ahead and look up that information needed to report any information that you find or know about this case, and where you can report it. So I hope you enjoyed this show. And if you have any information, if I may have missed something in regards, please message. Let me know anything. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on all your local podcast networks: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, wherever you may get your podcast, YouTube. You could email us any other cases that you may want to hear about, and I could investigate on or discuss, or just this case in general, at our Gmail at criminalistbehaviorpodcast@gmail.com. We also are on Facebook and Instagram. We didn't get Twitter set up because, well, let's just face it, I'm really not too savvy in the Twitter department, so, yeah, I didn't set that up yet, but, Stay tuned in, as I'm going to come out with the second part of this episode on Thursday. Until then, this is your host, Sarah Soudier, and don't forget to like, share, follow, or subscribe to our Criminalist Behavior Podcast. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your day.